I still remember the exact moment I realized my stepmother wasn't just being rude. She was declaring war. We were standing in the middle of a crowded family dinner when she wrapped her arm around my husband's ex-wife, smiled sweetly, and said, "This is the daughter-in-law I never had." Everyone laughed. I froze. Because she said it while staring straight at me. My name is Emily, and for 2 long years, my controlling stepmother invited my husband's ex-wife to every single family event, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, even moments that were supposed to belong to us. Every time, she praised her, compared her to me, chipped away at my place in the family, one comment at a time. I told myself to stay calm, to be mature, to not give her the reaction she clearly wanted. But silence has a cost. And the night she crossed the line in front of everyone, I learned that staying quiet wasn't strength anymore. It was surrender. When I married Daniel, I knew I wasn't just marrying a man. I was stepping into a family that already had a very clear idea of who belonged and who didn't. His stepmother, Linda, made that clear from the beginning. She liked to tell people she had raised Daniel into the man he is today, even though she came into his life when he was already 16. She said it with pride, with ownership, like he was something she had shaped with her own hands. The first time I met her, she hugged me a little too tightly and said, "So you're the new wife." Not Daniel's wife. Not my daughter-in-law. Just the new one. At the time, I brushed it off. Daniel warned me on the drive home. "My stepmom can be intense," he said carefully. "She doesn't handle change well." I smiled and said I understood. What neither of us expected was Rachel. Daniel's ex-wife had been part of the family since high school. She'd grown up at their dinner table, gone on vacations with them, posed for Christmas cards. When she and Daniel divorced, Linda never let her go. "She's family," Linda insisted. "Divorce doesn't erase that." The first holiday after Daniel and I got engaged, Rachel showed up at Thanksgiving. Linda acted like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh good, you're here early," she said, kissing Rachel's cheek. "You remember where everything is." Rachel did. She moved through the kitchen like she owned it, laughing with Linda, sharing stories from years before I existed in Daniel's life. I stood there, holding a salad bowl, feeling like a guest in someone else's memory. When Daniel noticed my discomfort, he leaned over and whispered, "I didn't know she'd be here." Linda overheard and laughed. "Don't be silly, Daniel. Rachel will always be welcome in this family. Always." That word stayed with me. From that day on, Rachel was everywhere. Birthdays, barbecues, Easter brunch. She didn't just attend, she was showcased. Linda would seat her beside Daniel, pull out old photo albums, retell stories where Rachel was the heroine and I was invisible. And every time I hesitated, every time I considered saying something, Linda would beat me to it. "You're not one of those jealous wives, are you, Emily?" she'd say with a smile. Because Rachel and Daniel are ancient history. The room would go quiet. All eyes on me. So I smiled back and said, "Of course not." And Linda's smile would widen, because she knew exactly what she was doing. After that Thanksgiving, I told myself it would get better. I believed that if I stayed calm, if I stayed kind, if I proved I wasn't threatened by the past, Linda would eventually accept me. I thought maturity would win. Instead, it trained her. She learned exactly how far she could go. At Christmas, Rachel arrived wearing the same shade of green Linda had suggested to me weeks earlier. Linda noticed immediately. "Oh, Rachel, you always had such taste," she said, looking her up and down. Then, turning to me with a soft laugh, "Emily prefers comfort, don't you, dear?" Everyone chuckled. I felt my face burn, but I smiled and nodded. "Yes, comfort," I said. Rachel sat beside Daniel, close enough that their arms brushed. Linda kept refilling her wine, asking about her job, her travels, her plans. When Rachel spoke, Linda listened like every word was precious. When I spoke, Linda nodded distractedly, already waiting for Rachel to jump back in. At Daniel's cousin's birthday, Linda pulled out old photos. Daniel and Rachel at prom, Daniel and Rachel at graduation, Daniel and Rachel on a beach vacation. She passed them around the table. "Such history," she sighed. "Some bonds never really break." Daniel tried to stop her. "Linda, maybe this isn't appropriate." She waved him off. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Emily knows we're just reminiscing." Then she looked straight at me. "You're not uncomfortable, are you?" It was never a question. It was a test. If I said yes, I would be jealous, insecure, the new wife who couldn't handle a confident ex. If I said no, Linda won. So I said no, over and over again. I learned how to disappear politely, how to laugh at jokes that cut, how to compliment Rachel's dress while standing in mine, how to swallow the feeling that I was slowly being erased from my own marriage's story. Daniel noticed the change before I did. "You've gotten quieter," he said one night, lying beside me in the dark.
I'm just tired, irriterad.
What I didn't say was this. Every family event felt like a performance, and my role was to prove I didn't mind being replaced. And Linda was getting bolder, because silence, to her, sounded exactly like permission. By the second year, Linda stopped pretending it was accidental. The comparisons became sharper, more deliberate, almost rehearsed. At Easter brunch, she watched me set the table and said, "Rachel always knew how to host. She understood presentation." Rachel smiled sympathetically, like she felt sorry for me. At a summer barbecue, Linda pulled me aside and whispered, "You know, Rachel never needed Daniel's help with social things. She was very independent." Then, louder so others could hear, "But everyone has different strengths." Daniel finally confronted her after that. "This has to stop," he said firmly. "You're disrespecting my wife." Linda looked genuinely offended. "I'm complimenting Rachel," she replied. "Why does Emily feel threatened by that?" I didn't feel threatened. I felt erased. Rachel began leaning into it. She started showing up earlier than everyone else, leaving later than everyone else. She brought desserts Linda loved. She remembered birthdays Linda had forgotten. She became the standard I was constantly measured against. One afternoon, while we were all in the living room, Linda said it openly. "If things had worked out differently," she sighed, glancing between Daniel and Rachel, "this family would look very different today." The room went quiet. Daniel stood up, so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "That's enough," he said. "You don't get to rewrite my life." Linda crossed her arms. "I'm just being honest." That word again. Honest. Later that night, Daniel apologized to me over and over. "I should have shut this down sooner," he said. "I didn't realize how bad it had gotten." I wanted to believe him, but something inside me had shifted. Because I wasn't just dealing with an insensitive stepmother anymore. I was dealing with a woman who was actively trying to reshape reality, one comment, one comparison, one public moment at a time. And deep down, I knew Linda wasn't testing me anymore. She was testing how far she could push before Daniel finally chose a side. Linda's birthday dinner was supposed to be simple. A reservation at her favorite restaurant. Close family. A polite cake. Daniel and I even planned to leave early because he had an early meeting the next morning. I told myself I would survive one more evening. I should have known better. Rachel arrived 10 minutes late, dressed like the night revolved around her. Heads turned. Linda's face lit up. "There she is," Linda said loudly, standing to hug her. "Now the party can start." I stayed seated, my hands folded in my lap. Dinner passed in a blur until Linda tapped her glass for attention. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, smiling warmly, "to have people in my life who truly understand this family." She reached for Rachel's hand. "Some women don't just marry into a family," Linda continued. "They belong to it. Rachel will always be the daughter-in-law I never had." The words landed like a slap. The table went silent. I felt heat rise to my face, my chest tightening as every eye shifted toward me. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else laughed nervously. Daniel stood up. "Linda, that's not okay." She waved him off. "Oh, don't make this about you. Emily knows I don't mean anything by it." I stood too. My voice was steady, even though my hands were shaking. "No," I said. "I don't know that." Linda blinked, clearly not expecting me to speak. "For 2 years," I continued, "you've invited Rachel to every family event. You've compared us. You've praised her at my expense. And you do it in public, so I'm forced to smile, or look like the problem." Linda's smile tightened. "You're being dramatic." Daniel stepped beside me. "She's telling the truth." That's when Linda leaned forward, her voice dropping just enough to sound dangerous. "You should think very carefully about how you speak to me," she said. "You're still new here." Something inside me finally snapped, not into anger, but into clarity. "I may be new," I replied quietly, "but I am his wife. And I won't disappear just to make you comfortable." For the first time, Linda didn't have a comeback. And in that moment, I realized the rules had changed. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't insulted her. But I had done the one thing she never expected. I stopped playing along. What Linda lost that night in front of witnesses, she tried to reclaim in private. It started quietly. A message to Daniel's aunt. Just expressing concern. A phone call to his father about how I was changing him. A casual comment to a cousin that she was worried Daniel seemed isolated. At first, we didn't even realize it was happening. Then invitations stopped coming to me, but Daniel still received them. When he declined, Linda made sure everyone knew why. "She doesn't like family gatherings," Linda would say. "She prefers to keep Daniel to herself." Daniel confronted her over the phone. "You're spreading lies," he said. "This has to stop." Linda sighed dramatically. "I'm protecting you. You don't see what she's doing to you." A week later, a letter arrived at our house. Not handwritten, not emotional, formal, from a law office. Linda was threatening to challenge Daniel's inheritance unless he reconsidered certain personal relationships that were causing family division. I watched Daniel read it, his hands shaking. "She's trying to scare us," I said. "No," he replied quietly. "She's trying to control me." That night, we didn't argue. We didn't panic. We sat at the kitchen table and made a decision together. We started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages. Voicemails saved and labeled. Dates. Times. Witnesses. When Linda called, Daniel put her on speaker. "You're tearing this family apart," she snapped. "No," Daniel said evenly. "You are. And we're done pretending otherwise." Her voice hardened. "You wouldn't be acting like this if you were still thinking clearly." That was the moment I understood something chilling. Linda wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing her grip on him. And when control is threatened, it doesn't disappear quietly. It escalates. What she didn't know was that every word she spoke after that night was becoming part of a record, one that would soon protect us instead of her. The smile was gone now. What remained was desperation. Linda didn't back down. She doubled down. The next few weeks felt like living inside a slow, tightening circle. Daniel's phone buzzed constantly, relatives asking if everything was okay, if he was safe, if he was sure he was making his own decisions. Linda had planted the same seed everywhere. Concern disguised as care. Then she crossed a line she couldn't uncross. We received an email from a mediator. Linda had contacted herself. She claimed she wanted to resolve family conflict peacefully. Daniel agreed to attend, on one condition. Our lawyer would be present. Linda didn't like that, but she showed up anyway. She sat across from us with perfect posture, hands folded, voice calm. Too calm. "I'm worried about my son," she said gently. "He's withdrawn. He's changed. He's not the Daniel I raised." The mediator asked, "What do you believe caused that change?" Linda looked at me. "I think Emily feels threatened by Rachel," she said. "And she's been pushing Daniel to cut people out of his life." My chest tightened, but I stayed silent. Then Daniel spoke. "That's not true," he said firmly. "What changed is that I finally started noticing your behavior." Linda's smile flickered. Our lawyer slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots. Voicemails transcribed word for word. The inheritance letter. Messages where Linda warned Daniel he'd regret choosing wrong. Statements from family members who admitted Linda had pressured them to take sides. The mediator's expression shifted. "Mrs. Miller," she said carefully, "this pattern indicates coercive control." Linda laughed sharply. "That's ridiculous. I'm his family." The mediator met her eyes. "Family relationships can still be abusive." Silence filled the room. For the first time, Linda looked uncertain, then angry. "You've turned him against me," she hissed, dropping the gentle tone. "You think a piece of paper makes you more important than me?" Daniel stood up. "No," he said quietly. "Your actions did that." Linda's voice shook, not with sadness, but rage. "You'll regret this," she said. "Both of you." But this time, the threat didn't land the way she expected. Because it wasn't private anymore. It wasn't whispered. It was documented. And as we walked out of that room, I realized something powerful. The woman who thrived in silence had just been exposed by facts. And facts don't bend to control. After the mediation, everything changed, quietly. No more surprise calls. No more concerned messages passed through relatives. No more public scenes. Instead, there was silence. At first, the silence felt heavy, like the calm before another storm. I kept waiting for the next move, the next threat wrapped in polite language. But it didn't come. What came instead was something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Daniel and I made a decision that night, together without debate. We went no contact. It wasn't dramatic. There were no final speeches or angry messages. Daniel sent one short email, clear and unemotional. "We're stepping back. Any further communication should go through our attorney. Please respect this boundary." Linda replied within minutes. Not with an apology. Not with reflection. With disbelief. She wrote about sacrifice. About loyalty. About how families don't abandon each other. She accused me of poisoning Daniel's mind, of turning him against the only woman who ever truly loved him. Daniel didn't respond. That silence, chosen, intentional, was something Linda had never experienced from him before. The first holiday without his family felt strange. We cooked dinner together in our small kitchen, just the two of us. No audience. No comparisons. No performance. I realized how tense I'd always been before, how I'd rehearse smiles, plan neutral outfits, memorize safe topics. That night, I laughed without checking who was watching. Daniel started therapy. Then I did too. We talked about boundaries, about enmeshment, about how control can hide behind tradition and concern, about how love doesn't demand loyalty tests or punish independence. I didn't even know I was allowed to choose, Daniel admitted one evening. I thought this was just family. I reached for his hand. It doesn't have to hurt to be real, I said. Over time, some relatives drifted back into our lives, quietly, cautiously. A cousin who apologized for not speaking up. An aunt who admitted she'd been afraid to challenge Linda. Others didn't. And that was okay. What surprised me most was Rachel. She sent a message, not to Daniel, but to me. I didn't realize how much I was being used. I'm stepping away too.
I'm sorry.
I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied with one sentence. I hope you find peace. I didn't need more. Because I finally understood something I hadn't before. Walking away wasn't losing. It was choosing not to be destroyed by someone else's need to control the story. Linda lost her audience when we stopped performing. She lost her leverage when we chose clarity over chaos. She lost her power when we realized distance wasn't cruelty, it was protection. And for the first time since I joined that family, I felt something steady settle into place. Safety. Not the kind that comes from approval. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to shrink for anyone. The storm hadn't ended, but we had stepped out of its center. And that made all the difference. For a long time, I thought endurance was the price of belonging. I believed that if I stayed polite enough, patient enough, small enough, I would eventually earn my place. That if I absorbed the comparisons, the public humiliation, the quiet threats disguised as concern, things would settle down. They didn't. What I learned, slowly, painfully, is that control doesn't soften with kindness. It adapts. It waits. And it feeds on silence. Linda didn't hurt me because she was confused or nostalgic. She hurt me because she needed to feel powerful. Because she believed love meant access, obedience, and ownership. And because no one had ever told her no in a way that mattered. I also learned something about myself. I used to think strength meant staying calm no matter how much it hurt. Now I know strength sometimes means saying, this ends here. Walking away wasn't easy. There were days I doubted myself, days I wondered if I'd overreacted, if I'd broken something that could have been fixed. But every time I questioned that choice, I looked at the evidence, the threats, the manipulation, the way my worth had been slowly chipped away. Healthy families don't operate through fear. Love doesn't require humiliation to survive. And respect is not something you beg for, it's something you require. Daniel and I are still rebuilding. Trust doesn't snap back into place overnight, especially when control has been normalized for years. But our home is quieter now, safer.
Ours.
We talk openly. We check in with each other. We protect our boundaries the same way we protect our future. And here's the lesson I wish someone had told me sooner. If a family member or anyone tries to make you disappear so they can feel important, the problem is not your presence. It's their insecurity. You are not too sensitive for wanting respect. You are not dramatic for naming harm. And you are not obligated to stay where you are consistently diminished. Distance is not punishment. Distance is protection. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you failed at love. Sometimes it means you finally understood what love is not. I no longer need Linda's approval. I no longer measure myself against someone else's past. And I no longer confuse silence with peace. Because peace isn't the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of safety, dignity, and choice. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not trying to belong. I already do right here in the life I chose to protect.